So, welcome to Long Range Facilities Planning Committee meeting number 2. We had our first meeting November 1st in the lecture hall. We did move the meeting in here tonight. We were expecting a few more people and we felt like it might fit in the lecture hall, so we hope you'll be comfortable enough. I want to say a couple of quick things before we jump into the agenda. Number one, Boerne is videotaping the entire presentation, and that full presentation will be posted to the website afterwards. And also probably highlights reel of the meeting will be posted at some point as well once they've done some editing of that. So just be aware that he is going to be videotaping the whole meeting. The second point I want to make is that this is purely an informational meeting. So we're here to present as much information as we have. We have some very special guests, a couple who are here in the audience and some who are going to show up by a video conference. From districts around the state. We were very fortunate to have their input into what one high school or what multiple high schools in a town looks like, and more particularly what that process to get to that point felt like, and what they did to make it either successful or if it wasn't as successful as they wanted, what some things are that they would do differently. So we're going to jump through those and introduce those as we go. So I wanted to quickly introduce a couple of key folks. Our board president, Carrie Kroll, is here tonight, so thank you, Carrie, for being here. Let me see. Shannon O'Connor is here, a board member. And Marissa Grijalva is here, thank you. Anybody else that I'm missing? Thank you. I'm not going to introduce anybody else. We have 2 hours to get through a lot of information, so I want to step through this as quickly and efficiently as possible. I want us to have as long as possible with those folks who are coming from around the state to share their wealth of knowledge with us. So at this time, I wanted to point out that this is not a decision-making meeting. We are not deciding anything tonight. In fact, we're not going to be deciding anything about this topic for at least a year, and possibly even longer than that. We're starting this process about a year ahead of what we would normally do, because we want to be sure that we really are addressing it as thoroughly as possible, and to make sure that we're really listening to the community. This really is probably a 100-year community decision. What ends up happening in the end of this process will determine how this community continues to grow for the next very long time. And so we want to try to get that as right as possible. I believe that we have to have a lot of information, we have to have a lot of input, and we have to make sure that we're really listening to everybody's voice. So we're going to attempt to do that as much as possible. We want to be as transparent as possible. If anybody feels like that we're not, I want you to question that, and I really want you to get with us, come and see us, ask us questions, post questions to the Google form that we have. However you need to do that, we want to know what those questions and comments are so that we can address them at the front of this process rather than trying to mitigate anything after a decision has been made. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to start out the meeting with a recap, a flash recap on where we are with the 2018 bond. And so I'm going to ask Kim Pruitt and Mike Garcia to give you that update.
Okay, Dr. Gary mentioned we're gonna just do a brief overview of the 2018 bond program. We spent a great deal of time talking about this in much greater detail at the last meeting, and so I'm going to talk for about 2 minutes and then hand it over to Mike Garcia, Construction Project Manager. The district passed a bond last May, and so this is just an overview of the 12 main components or projects that are included in the 2018 bond. And so we have additions and renovations to the high school to bring it up to 2,500 student capacity. The new, as we were referring to it, the new Walnut or the Walnut Springs Elementary relocation over to the Dripping Springs Middle School. site, elementary school number 5, the Dripping Springs administration relocation into the current Walnut once Walnut has moved into its new location, numerous technology upgrades, Dripping Springs Middle School renovations, which will be done in conjunction with the Walnut Springs Elementary relocation, transportation site improvements, some additional parking to try and put us in a good position to operate out our current transportation facility for the next 7 to 10 years. Some pretty extensive renovations to Dripping Springs Elementary School, and along with that are some minor renovations at Rooster Springs Elementary. That's combined as one project that Michael will talk a little bit more about here in just a couple minutes. Some various athletic improvements, the primary of those being turf and track replacements at Dripping Springs Middle School field, and then the 2 fields here at the high school. Furniture replacement, which is being done along with the Dripping Springs Elementary renovation, so that's a full classroom furniture replacement at Dripping Springs Elementary, and then land for future sites, including elementary number 5. This just shows kind of a broad overview of the schedule, give you a good idea of kind of where we are. As you can see, the arrow kind of showing today. You can see that we're fairly far along in the design process on those high school renovations. We'll be kicking off design on the Walnut relocation and elementary number 5 later this spring, and then a year or more down the road, once that's well underway, we would get into the design phase on administration relocation. Technology upgrades are ongoing and will continue. We'll be again doing the Dripping Springs Middle School renovations, kicking off that design at the same time that we start with design on Walnut Springs. And then we'll be moving into design work on the transportation site over the next month or so. We're well into the design and construction, actually working on our guaranteed maximum price with our construction contractor on the Dripping Springs, Rooster Springs renovations, and then pretty far along in the procurement identification of the furniture that we're going to be putting in at Dripping Springs Elementary, and then the land procurement process is ongoing. So for that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and he's going to go into a little more detail on the projects.
Howdy, Mike Garcia, construction manager for the district. Happy to be here. First project we'll get into is the high school additions and renovations. And you can see construction time frame this June 2019, and project will be substantially complete August 2020 in time for the next school year. Brief recap on scope. We're going to expand student capacity to 2,500 students. We're going to also add some additional classrooms. We'll be addressing the approved assessment items, and some of those are HVAC related, electrical, some mechanical equipment, some finish items. We'll also be adding a new building, which will be in that courtyard, the current courtyard of the high school. We're going to connect that northern piece. That building will include engineering, floral design, business and marketing, audio, visual, and physics. We'll also be adding a new flex gym, and we'll be expanding the ag barn. And just briefly, activities we're working on now, like Clint mentioned, we're really heavily into design right now. So just a couple bullet points. Corrigan, who's our architect, they and the consultants have completed the design development phase. We've met with the high school leadership team and individual departments and reviewed those documents and gotten feedback. We've met with the city and fire marshal to review these same design development documents. The internal staff has reviewed these documents. We're really trying to show that this has been a very collaborative process, and these bullet points highlight that. Our general contractor, which is American Constructors, they're working on an estimate of that DD package. And since the design development is complete, we're now moving into construction document phase. Next project are renovations to Dripping Springs Elementary and Rooster Springs Elementary. This project will happen this summer from start to finish. Start as soon as the children leave. We'll get on the ground June 3rd and finish right before they get back. Quick recap on scope at Dripping Springs Elementary. We're going to work on the approved assessment items, which are generally HVAC central plant, a lot of plumbing items, and some interior finishes. We're going to repaint the entire interior of the building. Also intend to replace all the exterior metal panels of the building. We'll also replace the stage curtains and renovate the space shuttle. Moving on to Rooster Springs Elementary, the items that we'll be working on there are the assessment items, and here much smaller scope in project, and it's generally interior finishes, some paint and some carpet. We'll also be adding ventilation to an art room that's needed. Just quickly, activities that we've been working on. We're a little ahead on the document process on this project. This is a much smaller project. Construction documents are 100% complete. The district has reviewed that and gotten feedback back to the consultants and the architect. Our general contractor, which is Cadence McShane, they're bidding the package currently. And right now, the general contractor, Corrigan, and district staff are working on a contract price. We're working through those negotiations now, and we intend to bring that to the board at the regular February board meeting for approval, so we can move forward and get some of those long lead time items ordered. Next project, furniture at Dripping Springs Elementary. Pretty self-explanatory. We're going to replace the furniture in all the classrooms, and currently the leadership team at Dripping Springs Elementary has made their selections, and we're out for pricing now. Just wanted to show you briefly how the high school project, the addition and renovation project, is progressing. This is design development rendering, and this came from hours and hours of collaboration with the district staff, with the high school staff, and high school staff made it very clear that they wanted this new addition to really look like it belonged with the building architecture that's currently here. So that's what you're seeing. So this is the view facing north, facing the student D parking lot. That's that sort of second entry that we call, and it'll have a security vestibule and all those engineering classes we spoke of earlier. And here's a view, like I mentioned earlier, we're closing in that courtyard. We're connecting the D Wing, the Performing Arts Center, and the Career Tech Building. All three of those connections are happening here. So we're closing out that courtyard, and this is what that will look like. Two-story, same type of stone that we currently have at the high school. So again, we just want to give you an idea of what this project is looking like now. And that's all I have. If you have any questions for Clint or myself, great. I'll turn it over to Dr. Jim.
Thank you, Mike. Right, I wanted to spend a little bit of time going over what happened at the first meeting back in November, just as a recap for those of you who were here, because I think it puts in context where our conversation has to be, and then also to make sure that anybody who wasn't at that meeting understands this part of the discussion. So if you would mind going to the end, we're going to start with the end in mind. And so what we did at the meeting is we laid this out in pieces. So we put up one of these tiles at a time, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this, but I wanted to just point out how we came to understanding what the timeline of these decisions looks like. So what we know from the demographer at this time, and remember this is the demographic report that was originally done in 2016 and updated again in October of 2017, and know also that the demographer is currently working. We'll hopefully bring a report to the board in the next couple of months, and in May when we meet for long-range facility planning meeting number 3, our focus at that time will be on the new demographic report. So we'll have updated numbers at that time. This is based on that former demographic report, but these are the numbers that we know, and so that's why we have them up. So we know that in August of 2025, we'll have a high school student population of 3325 about. So at that point in time, we know we have to have a solution of some kind. That's 120% capacity of 2,500 students, currently expanding this facility to 2,500 students. We will have to have something ready in August of 2025 in order to accommodate that student population. We know that in August of 24, at the high school, we'll have just over 3,000 students. So we know we can manage for that 24-25 year. But we know that in 25 we'll be ready over capacity. We also know that our middle school populations by May of 23 will be about 2290, which means that we have to have middle school number 3 good to go by August of 2023. And we'll also be then ready for elementary school number 6 in 2023. And again, you can see middle school capacities in May of 2022 is about 2,000, which is just a little under 120% capacity. So we know that we can manage for that school year based on these numbers. We'll be reassessing all of this when the new demographic numbers come out. And currently we're scheduled to open elementary number 5, the new Walnut Springs Elementary, and the renovation of Crooked Springs Middle School in August of 2021. So if you look at the pink underneath, then if we have to open a high school solution of some kind in 2025, then if you back up 2 years of construction and back up a year of planning and documents, then that takes us to the final chance to pass a bond election for the high school changes in May of 2022. That doesn't mean we have to do it then, it just means that's probably the last chance we can do it if we're going to get a solution ready to open in August of 25. And when you map out the middle school and the elementary school ones, you get similar timelines, which give us these red boxes, which are the potential bond elections in May of 2021, or potentially even in November of 2020. What we have to remember is that November 2020 is also a presidential election, and so we just have to pay attention to that. And then we back up and say, well, if we're going to have a bond election in one of these timeframes, then when does the board have to call a bond election by law? When does the board have to have a recommendation from the bond steering committee for what's going to go into the bond package? And when do we have to start that planning? And that's what wound us back to saying we're starting long-range facility planning now. We want to build a foundation of information of what we're talking about and why we're talking about it. And then starting in September of 2019, we'll be starting regular long-range facility planning meetings probably every month in order to prepare for bond steering committee and a potential bond as early as November of 2020, depending on what the community decides to do and how we plan to execute whatever plan it is that we come up with. So does that make sense, and are there any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
On the numbers for 2024 and 2025, do they have the data showing what the grade level population is going to be?
Yes, we do. So if you go to the website, you'll find a full demographic study, and if you dig in there, you'll find all the grade level numbers and the details are all in there. You're welcome to do that. I will say that everything that we're producing in long-range facilities plan is going on that long-range facility planning website. If there's something you need that's not there, please let us know and we'll make sure that you get it. It is there, yes. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and one of the things we said we would do tonight is present some information about the research that's out there about one high school versus two high schools or multiple high schools in a town. We also, as I started looking into that, what really becomes part of the issue is high school size and the discussions that go around high school size. So I'm going to share very briefly with you what I found out. That doesn't mean this is everything that's out there by any means. It doesn't mean that it's all of the information, it's only some of the information. It's the best information I could find. There is not a lot of information about high school size. Some of the research is older, which we don't necessarily like. But I wanted to share with you what I did find out. The caveat in all of this is that what the data tells me is that there is a difference between between a lot of things in large and small high schools. The problem here is that the definition of a large high school starts with 400 kids. And so we're talking about high schools of 2,500 or 5,000 or 7,000. So we're already talking about large and super large high schools. And so I'm not sure how much of this is applicable. I think some of it is why I want to visit it really quickly. But again, this was in the agenda that we sent to everybody. We will post the agenda also on the website afterwards so that you're welcome to dig into this later more. On the second line of this agenda item, the first line is the presentation. The second line is links to some of the source documents that I found that feeds this presentation. So I know there's other things out there. If you want to add to that pile, we're happy to try to bring that to you. Am I in charge? Okay, so here we go. There's really no clear dividing line. On average, research indicates that effective elementary schools should be 300 to 400 students. We have 850 student elementary schools, and that's 400 to 800 students is appropriate for a secondary school. We have 850 student middle schools, and right now 2,500 student high school. So we currently have 2,000 students here at the high school in an 1,850 capacity building. We're moving this building to 2,500 capacity because that's the way it was master planned. That addition you've seen, and by 2025 we know the numbers. So here's part of the board. As I look through what other schools were doing and talk to other superintendents, often when they open second or multiple high schools, they don't start them out as 9 through 12 high schools. They start them out as 9, 10, and then expand them over the next 2 years to have that full graduating class. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Unfortunately, the folks from Boerne are not going to be here tonight, but I did talk to them in person, so I'm going to tell you their story. But this will make a little more sense when we talk about that. And again, you don't have to take pictures or write this down because all of this is available to you. So what I did is I said, based on projection numbers in our demographic study, can I map out what we look like from 2024 to 2035 in terms of high school size and break it down into various different scenarios? Those scenarios are in the first column, but I'll try to read the numbers. I'm going to show you a picture of it in a second. One high school, we start right now at 2024 with 3,065 students. In 2025, we're over at 3325 about, and then I just extrapolated that number out evenly. So it gets us down to 2035 with about 7,500 students at the high school. I know that number is not that far off because I asked the demographer to give us a report on build-out, potential build-out for the district. What that means is how many students do they expect to be when all the growth stops and we're done, how many students do they expect to have in the district? There is a letter from them in the resources that are attached to the agenda that lines out that the high school number for build-out will be somewhere between 64 and 7,400 students. So this is not unrealistic. This is potentially when we'll get there, somewhere in 2035. So then in column 2, all I did was I said, okay, so if you open high school number 2 in 2025, then what does it look like and how does that split up the numbers? Opening with a 9th and 10th only and then flowing that out. And what does it look like if eventually you open a high school number 3 and finally get to that 7,500 number? So of course if you have just one high school in town, then that high school population just continues to grow over time until you eventually get to having 7,500 students in one high school. And we're about to talk to the Allen High School principal, Jason Johnston, who's going to explain to you what that looks like and what that looks like. If you split out high schools, then in 2025 we were at 9th and 10th grade at the second high school. That would drop the population at Crooked Springs High School somewhat. And then every year after that you add a grade level, which would reduce the size of this high school and increase the size of that second high school until both of those have fairly even capacity, and then those will continue to grow out over time. And by 2035, you have about somewhere in the 3,800 students in each of those 2 high schools. So that's one potential. And then, of course, if you do 3 high schools, the exact same thing happens over time. except in 2033, when you open 9th and 10th grades in high school number 3, you drop the population of both your other schools as you redo attendance zones, and then eventually those pick back up again. And by build out, you've got somewhere in the 2,500 student range at each of your 3 high schools in town. I'm not saying this is how we do it, I'm just saying these are the potentials, and one way of looking at it, I want to give you a visual of what that looks like. Quick questions from anybody? Okay. These are the 10 largest high schools in Texas as listed by the UIL from the last realignment. I just wanted you to see what they are. Starting with Allen with 6,664 kids, grades 9 through 12. They, of course, and you'll hear this at the 9th grade center and some other ideas. Plano West, Plano East, and Plano, 3 high schools in Plano, all above 5,000 students. And then after that, they come down over time. When you look at this whole list, and I did link this list in the resources, you have to get quite a long way down several pages before you hit Dripping Springs at 1,800 or almost 2,000 students now. So there are a lot of very large high schools in the state of Texas. Here's a few quick things that the U.S. Department of Education said about large high schools. And the thing I want to point out here is that there is a difference in a large high school between whether you're serving low-income students or whether you're serving affluent students. Low-income students are much more affected by large high school, negatively affected by large high schools than affluent students are. And so I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. Small schools, and again, remember they're talking about really small schools, like 800 students or less, and some of these things are true. And again, you have to remember there are a lot of caveats that go along with all of this. So we know that you can't just look at school size alone. You have to look at a lot of other factors that affect how students perform, how teachers feel in the environment, what the culture is like. And you're going to hear that as we talk to our teams from around the state that have a lot of different models that are all actually very successful. The interesting thing about cost is that you would guess that small schools are more expensive, and that is true. But there is a sweet spot where the size of the school as it becomes large enough eventually costs more too. So the graph as you showed, and I'll show you that in a little bit, there is a sweet spot in the middle around about 2,500 students when efficiency is at its peak. And then of course if you make schools too small, then you run into opportunity and resource problems for students. So that was U.S. Department of Ed. These other things are from other sources. I've tried to quote them if at all possible, and then the links to the source documents again are in the agenda. Again, this is about benefiting economically disadvantaged students. Size does matter with those students more than it does with more affluent students. So most high schools they found though are too large to maximize student achievement, which was interesting. But it's not impossible to have a great large high school, it's just hard. Okay, this is about the efficiency of those schools, so I'm not going to go over this again, but this is what the data says about cost per student as you're moving from very small schools with less than 100 students on the left to schools with more than 3,000 students on the right. So there comes a point when you get large enough that it does actually start to cost you more. The reason that we've got to this point in this country is because of school consolidation over time. And so that has happened across the United States, not just in Texas, and largely because people believe that large schools created more opportunities for kids and that they were more efficient. One of the opportunities that they looked at was when large schools create smaller learning communities within their schools, and that can be a very effective way of minimizing some of the negative of large schools. And there's a lot of schools that do that very effectively. It's just not as much research on what schools within a school look like on those campuses. This is the same information about the size of schools. Again, these are not my words, this is just a summary of other people's research in the area of school size. So you can see that the research starts to repeat itself fairly quickly as you start to look at the same issues that are coming up again and again. These are attributes associated with small school that researchers identified as accounting for more positive outcomes. And again, just remembering that what they're talking about in small schools is much smaller in size than what we're going to be talking about. Okay, any thoughts, comments, questions before we go on to the next slide? So what I tried to do was summarize what other schools across the nation have done in order to plan for growing high school populations. And so these are, again, not a definitive list, but certainly some of the options that I've seen out there about what can possibly happen. Comprehensive high school is a 9 through 12 high school, very much like this one, that offers a lot of multitude of programs, athletics, music, fine arts, as well as academics, career and technical vocational courses. Magnet schools are schools in the district where students from anywhere in the district can attend that school, and they're often specialized in some form or fashion, either as a fine arts academy or a STEM academy or something like that. Of course, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and then STEAM just adds in the arts. And we see, you'll hear Adam talking about their new STEAM academy, which is very recently opened. And that gives students an opportunity to attend from across the district. Fine Arts Academy, same idea. Freshman Center, where only 9th grade students are. Again, you'll hear Alan talk about their Freshman Center, which has about as many kids as we have at our high school in it right now. Junior high school is when you split out grades 9 and 10 with a senior high school, grades 11 and 12, and Plano is one example that does that. We talked about schools within a school, or career and technical education school, trade schools, alternative schools, virtual schools, early college, high schools. Pathways in technology, early college, high schools are fairly new in the state of Texas. Brings together those elements of high school, college, and the professional world. That really is aimed at launching kids into real-world occupations faster than normal. And then I put New Tech High School, but really there's a group of, this is a particular kind of high school, a particular organization, but there are others like High Tech High, and these are specialized schools that run in a certain configuration that are supported by a larger organization. Big Picture Schools out of Connecticut is another one that operate all over the country. They have great models. They model their training and their professional development after a certain way of doing high school. Okay, any questions so far? Right, I wanted to point out a couple of things about our current situation that I think are important to understand. And the first one is this. So this is, of course, just a Google map of satellite image of the current high school. So we're sitting in the cafeteria in that building right now. What I want to point out to you is that the 100-odd acres that we're sitting on is pretty much full of facilities. So the building itself, all the playing fields, baseball, softball, the track field, the stadium, all the parking, the academic building itself, pretty much fills up the land that the district currently owns. As part of the stadium project, we did build this portion of what is called Roger Hanks Parkway extension from 290 all the way to the stadium. I want you to understand that that road is going to be extended and move around the north side of the high school and eventually connect to 12. And that will come online sometime in the next 2 to 3 years, potentially. The reason I mention that is we do own one more parcel of land, which is this 17 acres, which is potential for another facility of some kind. Just understanding that it's going to be cut off from the high school site by Roger Hanks Parkway as it comes around the corner and heads towards 12. The other site that the district owns that was purchased before I came to the district in 2012 is the 155 acres that is at the T of Sawyer Ranch Road, which is right here. 290 is up here. And this is Garden Hill Road, and this is 1826. So we own this 150 acres, and the district did purchase also the 5-acre lot that then controls the intersection at Sawyer Ranch and 290. This site was purchased as the site for high school number 2 because the district did a secondary school study in 2006, which indicated at that time that the community did not want high schools larger than 2,500 students. So the administration had the foresight to secure a parcel of land in the right part of the district, on the east side of the district, as a potential high school number 2 site. So I just need you to know that that exists. We also know that this site has the potential at 155 acres to accept a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school on site, and potentially a second transportation hub for buses in the district. And I'll tell you that because we did ask the architects to test fit it and make sure that it could accommodate that level of density on that site. Now, whether the road infrastructure can handle that density is a completely different question, but I'm not going to address that tonight. Okay, any questions about the land that the district owns right now? Yes?
How many acres do we own near?
This site is just over 100 acres.
But the land that we own is
At the high school,
Blue Square.
it's 17 acres.
17.
And that will reduce somewhat as the road goes through because there's some right of way that's going to, I want to go back there for a second. So the only problem here is if you've ever driven down this driveway to get to the north parking lot of the stadium, you'll know that there's a huge drain swale right there that then goes under the baseball field and then comes out of the CISD baseball fields. That is going to be extremely expensive to build on or over, and so this road potentially is going to have to shift a little further north than what I've drawn so that it doesn't end up in that drainage ditch, which is going to eat somewhat into this 17 acres. Okay. If there's no other questions, then I think the next thing is for us to jump into so I would like for you to welcome on the screen Mr. Jason Johnston. He is currently the high school principal for Allen High School. He is the principal right now at the 10, 11, 12 portion of the campus. There is I understand a 9th grade principal group. So, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity. I think back in around the mid-90s, made the decision to hold a one campus for a lot of different reasons. Mainly from the standpoint of that sense of community. And so from 1999, the campus that we have now was built, it's been added on to multiple times. We've grown from about 2,500 students. So now on the 10, 11, and 12 campus, we have just under 5,000 students. There are 1,800 students over at our freshman center, of which about 1,000 of them shuttle back and forth between our two campuses from across the street for some of the core content and CTE classes they take there on the main campus. I saw the research talking about small schools, and 100% agree with that, the mindset of smaller being better. We do the best that we can on our campus to make sure that we have the focus and the mantra of something for everyone. We try to ensure that we get our kids connected as soon as possible. We have a really strong mentorship program between our juniors and seniors that go down to the freshman center and acclimate those freshmen on what it means to be a successful Alameda and how to get plugged in. We take great care in making sure that all of our students have those 5 friends around them that they do life with. I equate it sometimes to like a large church. You can go into the sanctuary, hear the service, and go home and be fed from that standpoint. But until you plug yourself in and make it your family is where you really get that growth. And so in my mind, I went to high school and graduated with 26 of my friends. We graduated in 30 minutes, or I'll hold a 3.5-hour graduation now for our 1,700 students, but it's about who you're doing life with and how you focus on that. One of the benefits of the large campus is that we don't have to try to replicate programs across the campus or shuttle back and forth to the other high school to be able to offer all the different things. So on our campus, we have a school store that is totally student run. We have a school restaurant, totally student run. We've got a TV and radio station, again, that are totally student run, as well as a plethora of other programs that we're able to offer there on the campus. To help us accommodate the growth we've had in recent years, we have just recently opened a 40,000 square foot STEAM center that will have our juniors and seniors traveling back and forth for a lot of their upper level science, technology, math, engineering, and art classes. It's a little bit of a trip for us, but again, we've added that to help accommodate the need of about 500 students on the main campus for any given class group. And then perhaps even more importantly, as we move to House Bill 5, and we're moving back into planning experiences for our students with associate degrees and certificates, our district, our school board, made a big investment in partnership with College here locally, who is building a career technology center just across the street from our STEAM center. We gave $12 million to that project, which they're going to allocate for us another 40,000 square feet for our students to take dual credit classes. So we anticipate going from right now, we have around 800 students that are part of the dual credit program, to increasing that to around 2,100 students. We do have some challenges. Obviously, when you have one large high school and you're thinking about extracurricular and co-curricular activities, There are still limitations to that. We have the largest band in the country at just under 800 marching students. We have our football program is a no-touch sport. Our sub-varsities do a great job of ensuring kids get playing time and practice time. Obviously, as you move up to the varsity level, it gets more and more competitive. We do face some challenges with our other varsity sports, where you're limited between 12 and 15 players on those teams. To offset that, we have a really strong community program in which our students are actively involved in, and they're currently exploring some of the intramural aspects of that. All in all, yeah, I think it's just a matter of that our community made that decision, honored that decision. We have great sense of community pride from support of all of our different programs, academically and athletically. I could talk for 4 hours. I don't know.
Thank you, Jason. I think we're going to give them an opportunity to ask some questions directly so that you can answer if that's okay.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind, if you want to ask a question, would you come up here? We're trying to make sure that he can hear out of this microphone. So if you have a question, feel free to come up here and we'll get it on.
It might also help if they could use the chat feature on that question so that I can read as well. It's up here a little bit.
Hi, I'd like to hear a little more detail about the STEAM Center and STEAM Academy that you've opened up. What's been your, I would say, your speed bumps along that path, and what, I would say, if you're going to go that route, what would you recommend as best practice?
Just to clarify, that was about the STEAM Center, what we did with the STEAM Center?
Yes, sir.
Well, the STEAM Center is just coming on board for us. It's, we believe we're one of the few in the country, if the only in the country, that's going to be truly a K-12 site for us. It's got 2 halves to it. One aspect is for us to have just a K-8 side where it's field experiences, so we'll coordinate with our district curriculum department and different grade levels. We'll make 1 to 2 trips a school year over there. The building is designed so that the younger students can peer down into the high school science labs. And the part of that is to help us demystify the high school. One of the big challenges that we have is that sense of natural fear that any school has of progressing from elementary to middle to high school is what's it going to be like. It just seems so big. And so it's given us a chance to kind of demystify that for our students. We'll open in August of 19 for the high school side of that. The challenges for us are going to be the transportation and obviously building the schedule. I will say that unlike multi-high school districts, we don't have the challenge of the STEAM Center needing to be able to drive the master schedule for the high school, which if your high school principal is a really important component to you building the most efficient course offerings for your students. And so I can tell you more about roadblocks probably in September of next year, but right now it's been really, really smooth. We've opened it to the community, gotten great feedback from that. It's an outstanding outdoor learning experiences and opportunities for our students on that. But we're really excited about that. And then 2020, that dual credit facility will open up for us. So we run a modified block schedule, which means that we run what we call skinny periods, first and 8. That allows us to offer some of our athletic periods and band classes and fine arts classes on a daily basis. And then our middle schedules are all blocked 90 minutes. And so we're going to maintain that schedule. And then we're building course offerings at the STEAM Center that will allow students to travel. We have a 22-minute seat-to-seat projected time from leaving the main campus to get to the STEAM Center. So we're going to have that time built in and have offerings around that where it doesn't impact our students. It's actually going to allow more flexibility. Some students can start their day earlier and finish earlier, or start later and finish later. So we're really going to expand our operational hours to accommodate.
Thank you, Jason. Can you speak to the size of Allen ISD as a district, how many square miles you are, and then also the location of the freshman center in relation to the 10-12 center?
Well, I should be able to tell you how many square miles we are right. I can't. I apologize for that.
I can. It's 27.
Well, we are a landlocked community, and so we're currently at 22,000 students. We anticipate maybe adding another 1,500 to 2,000 students total across the district, which would equate to about another 500 or so at the main campus. We're on about 170 acres there at our main site. That STEAM Center location is about 14 acres. Now, if you were to pull up Google Maps, you can see that the freshman center, the newly built freshman center, is just across the street, literally across Greenville from us. And so it is less than a tenth of a mile from the main campus. We run probably 70 shuttles a day back and forth for the freshmen coming to our campus or our students going over there for some of their outdoor adventure or other elective offerings. And so it's not uncommon for us to have anywhere between 500 to 800 freshmen on the main campus at any given time. So it's more like a 9-12 campus, just with that satellite campus across the street.
Right, and what I understand is that there are some courses that are only offered at the freshman center, so you can have 10, 11 graders going down to the freshman center for classes, right?
Yes, sir. We do have not for any core content classes. They go over there for we have a really strong outdoor adventures program that includes our archery program and those type of things, and then our debate classes go over there. So we send about 300 of our high school students to the freshman center. They send around 1,000 students to us throughout the 2 days.
Oh, and so just one other observation. So in 1995, when they were making this decision to go to one or multiple high schools in Allen, the existing high school was the freshman center. And so when they elected to remain as one high school, that's when they constructed this new campus on 177 acres.
Yes, sir. They were operating out of what was called the old Dillard Center. They built the current Allen High School, and then within about 2 to 3 years added extensions. So we have about a quarter-mile long main hallway with what I call fingers that go off the sides of the building. Initially, those fingers were probably 50,000 square feet. Now each of them are over 120,000 square feet, both two stories. So they added to the extensions to the main hallways, to the hallways.
So you get your steps in every day.
I'm sorry, say again.
You get your steps in every day. Never mind.
I get my steps in, yes, sir.
You got it. I have another question. Oh, you have about 7,000 students on about 200 acres, essentially. Can you tell us about traffic?
It was miserable until this current year. We do have about 7,000, so roughly, I've estimated that about 50% of our driver-eligible students drive to our campus. The way that we're set up is very much like a small college, where we're kind of offset of Exchange and Greenville, which are 2 pretty high traffic areas. We made some adjustments this year to our parking lot to make for easier traffic flow off of Rivercrest, and that's significantly helped us. But we do have a really strong partnership with the city of Allen, we have officers that are out there each and every morning that are helping direct traffic for us before school and after school to improve that flow. So it's a little bit of an issue from one direction, but all in all, with that number of students and with the number of traveling back and forth, what we find is that we have so many students have that late arrival, we're able to mitigate a lot of the problems that we had initially.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. You're free to, of course, disappear if you'd like to, but you're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of our presentation. But we really do appreciate you helping us out tonight.
I know Dr. Maglisceau really well, so I'm going to stay here and stare at him while he speaks to you a little bit.
So it is a great honor for us to welcome in person Dr. Reedy, superintendent from Frisco ISD from 1997 until 2012. And if you look at the agenda, you'll see that Frisco grew from 3,800 students to 43,000 students in the time that he was superintendent, from 6 schools, pretty much like what we have right now, to 56 schools. And so thank you, Dr. Reedy, for coming all the way down.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gary. Retired is the operative word there. I've been retired. I felt so at home when I walked in here because there's so many people that I saw right away. Kevin Haney over here, formerly of the colony, went to Africa with my wife. It was a mission trip. So it was good to see him. He and his wife Lisa are great. Coach Zimmerman back there, we worked with him at Liberty High School, and my son was on that staff, and we have great fondness for him. Mark Cousins is on the committee here. Mark and I worked together when I was on the Legislative Council of UIL. And of course, anytime I'm around people who are interested in kids, I'm happy. So it's good to be here. I wanted to just make a few points about Frisco, and I want to say Allen is a great school district. We're neighbors. And if I had come up through the Allen system, I don't doubt that I would have been in favor of doing it exactly the way they've done it, with their different ways that they divide that school to make students feel connected. They do great things. I'm going to tell you what we did in Frisco, and there's no one way to do it. I'm known a little bit in North Texas as a proponent of smaller high schools, and that's a little unfair because I think that's for every community to decide, and obviously you're trying to decide early on, and that's the best way to do it. One of the reasons that we came up with the model that we started with, and somehow, just by good fortune, have been able to stay with, is that in the late 80s, I was in Frisco from 1976 through 2013, so it's hard for me to blame anything bad that goes on there on anyone else. But in 76, we only had 800 students, but we were starting to grow. And about 89, 90, we started a committee like this, not this large. I don't think we had this many people in Frisco at that time. But we got together and we decided, what are we going to do about grade configuration, which led into a discussion of high school size. Well, unfortunately, about that time, in the late 80s and early 90s, two of the mega high schools in the area were having problems that they've never had since, but they were having at that time. They involved drug sting and teen suicide, two terrible tragedies. And they made the front page of the Dallas paper, they made national magazines, and the little committee we had together, we said, well, maybe some of that has to do with alienation, the feeling of isolation. So what we came up with was something that we didn't know, we weren't smart enough to know, we couldn't afford. But we decided that's what we were going to do. And it was $660 for elementary schools, I think it was $900 for middle schools, and $1,800 for high schools. And we thought we'd take out a high school, you know, every 10 years or so at one time. And then the tsunami of student growth started about the time I became superintendent in 1996. And lest you think that I'm trying to take credit for the growth in Frisco, let me say I've been going 6 years and they've grown 20,000 students since I left. So it continues to grow. It's in a great location, and there's still a lot of available land. So people are buying houses and we're having more students. After we decided that we were going to build schools that size, we hit 2002. We had one high school, Frisco High School, and it was the 100th year of our school district. It started in 1902, and oddly enough, we decided to call that school Centennial High School. And it opened with tranquility and peace, but the 2 years that preceded it were not pleasant. Some of the toughest times in my life, because students, parents, even teachers were wondering about how it would affect them negatively and that type of thing. And it was a very, very tough time for us to get through that. But somehow in retrospect, when I look back at some of the parents and students and what they said after it was over, they said, you know, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. It was nice to be part of opening something fresh and new and starting a new tradition. One of the biggest complaints I got was siblings. Maybe you had a 10th grader at one high school and from the same family, a 12th grader at another high school. And we did open it as you outlined up here with 9th and 10th graders the first year. And usually, Mark, you'll appreciate this, in the mid-year of a reclassification, because that made it where 9 through 11 would be the first year that they would be eligible for team sports in the district classification. And I think in almost every case we did it. We had some blips. We grew so fast. Coach Zimmerman will remember this. We opened Liberty High School in a middle school that we built in 13 months because it was growing so fast we couldn't get the high school ready. I did receive no death threats, but several comments on the online chatter about How inappropriate that was, but we did make it through that. One of the things that Jason mentioned, and they really do a good job at Allen with this, but this data was reported in the newspaper, and I'm just repeating it, and there was a 3-part series on this topic in Morning News maybe 6 months ago, and it says that 85% of high school students in Frisco ISD are either in UIL activities or related activities, closely related activities. That's a very high percentage of student participation, and that was one of the goals that we had when we set out to build schools of that size. An adjustment we made, at first we were accused of doing it so that we could stay in 4A, what's now 5A, and that is not true, because that 1,800 student enrollment, the enrollment when we made the decision to do it for the second highest classification was 1,500. So we were going to be in the highest classification. Over time, as the mega high schools, we were right in the shadow of the 3 Plano schools in Allen, and they started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We decided that we didn't want to be in there with them. We didn't want to be in the district with them. So when that enrollment figure went up to the cutoff being 2,100, which it is now, or 2,150 maybe, I'm not sure, we decided that rather than build like high school number 6, oh, by the way, after we opened Centennial, we opened 5 other high schools within the next 9 years. And since that time, there have been 3 more that opened, and there are 2 more under construction. So that will be a total of 12 high schools by 2022. We started something that we're having trouble stopping because after Frisco ISD failed the TRE 3 or 4 years ago, they did a community survey, a scientific survey, and 82% of the respondents said they wanted to keep the high schools the size that they were. So they're between a rock and a hard place. They want you to keep the high schools that size, but maybe they're not willing to vote in a tax ratification election to do it. They went back, being able to drop the tax rate through a tax swap. They didn't pass the TRE, and they are set to try to continue what they started. I want to say Jason brought up the CTE center, and that is a problem when you build smaller high schools. It's just impossible to replicate that complex and expensive programming on now 12 high schools by 2022. So in the heart of Frisco, across Wade Boulevard from the Preston Ridge campus of College is a CTE center. And on any given day, it's been expanded twice. 1,500 to 1,800 students, juniors and seniors, will be transported from one of the comprehensive high schools for career and technical education programming. Is it ideal? No, but there's a silver lining in everything. Some of our bus drivers who were going to quit because it was a part-time job now have a full-time job. They're hauling kids all day long. So that's the way we dealt with that. With that, that's just an overview. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions anyone has. Yes, ma'am.
So all comprehensive high schools, but with the CTE Center, do you have any academies?
No. They're all, and really one of the questions we hear from parents on rezoning was, we're afraid that you won't have that type of programming at the new high school, so we were committed to make sure that we had equitable programming from high school to high school, and the CTE is the only break for that. And all of them have the dual enrollment through college. Yes. Thank you for letting me be here. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Dr. Reedy. Really appreciate you coming over down here to share with us. Don Tillis is currently an assistant superintendent in Pearland ISD, which is in Houston. He was the assistant superintendent in Boerne ISD in 2004 when they made their high school split. He unfortunately could not be here tonight. but I did talk to him on the phone and I took some notes, and so I'd like to share their story with you because it is a fascinating one. At that time, Dr. John Kelly, who's now the superintendent in Pearland, was the superintendent in Boerne ISD, and so this was in 2004. They knew that they were going to have to, they were in the exact position we're in now. They were talking about one high school versus two high schools. They put together a big committee like this. They had a facilitator from the outside come in. They did all the studies that they were supposed to do. And this committee went away and recommended that they remain one high school in Boerne ISD. And so they put together a bond package and they went on the road to present that bond package to voters. Well, very quickly they learned that there was a very vocal, very strong group of parents and community members who were not in favor of one high school, who organized themselves and became apparent very quickly that they were not going to be able to pass that bond issue. So they hit pause, they went back to the drawing table, they put a new committee together, they did all the work over again. They polled the community with a Vassily survey, which they did send me. I just got it today, so I'll make sure to link it into the data that you have on the agenda. But when they polled the community, it came back with 2-to-1 support for two high schools. And so they switched gears, they put two high schools on the bond package, and that bond passed. So once they had decided they were going to have two high schools, they then entered into a discussion of did they want those two high schools to compete against each other. And they came to the conclusion that they did not want them to compete, so they purposely zoned them and said that one as a 3A high school at the time and one as a 4A high school at the time. And that was a great idea. Unfortunately, they couldn't control the growth, and so over time, both of those high schools have to be expanded, and they are both now 5A high schools, except one is a small 5A high school and one is a large 5A high school, because of the way that the zones are drawn. And so now they have them competing against each other, which is what they didn't want to do, and there's an unfair advantage for one of the high schools. Part of what they did with the attendance zoning and the boundaries when they opened the high schools was they allowed choice. So these two high schools are in fact within 2 miles of each other in the center of town. One is just north of the center of Boerne, one is just south of the center of Boerne, and they allowed students to choose where they wanted to go to high school. So once they had built Boerne Champion High School, which was the second high school, which is the larger one, they moved everybody into Boerne Champion High School because it had that capacity, and they completely renovated Boerne High School because they wanted equity across the district. So a year later, they reopened Boerne High School, and their intention was to open it as a 9-10 campus and kind of do the staggered approach that we heard Dr. Reedy talk about, and we mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, there was a large backlash in the community because there were a lot of juniors and seniors who wanted to graduate from Boerne High School and not from Boerne Champion High School, and so they were forced eventually to open Boerne High School as a 9-12 campus immediately in that first year. Part of the reason they put them as close to each other as they did was it was very difficult for them to find the land for the second high school, so it was difficult for them to find the 100 acres that they needed. And in Boerne, utilities are a big problem, specifically access to water. That's part of the reason actually that this happened in 2004, that they still only have 2 high schools, because that lack of utilities has actually managed to keep a lid on their growth somewhat. They're still growing, but they certainly don't have the explosive growth that we see in Texas. They decided at the time to provide identical academic programs at both schools. They ran into the problem of when certain courses didn't make it one of the other high school, then because of that commitment to same programming, they ended up having to transport students to the other high school for those programs. So his final message to me was make sure that you really understand the heart of your community. Make sure that you are listening very carefully to what they want, because that was obviously a very difficult experience for them of making a decision, but not having really dug in deep enough and then finding out that they had to go backwards and remake that decision. So, I'm probably not going to be able to answer any questions about Bernie other than what I've told you now. So we kind of skip that part. And I think I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Eric Wright, current superintendent of Hayes CISD, our neighbor. And he's going to talk to you a little bit about the same topic that they're currently building and about to open their third high school. So welcome, Dr. Wright.
All right, thank you, Bruce, and good evening to all my neighbors. We currently are just over 20,000 students, and as Bruce said, we're about to open high school number 3, which is Johnston High School. I don't know if any of you had a chance to drive by 967. It's a beautiful facility, and we'll be ready to open for 9th and 10th graders this fall. And basically, in doing the historical research of why our community chose to do what they did, I've only been there, I just completed my first year, so it's all historical for me as well. But the rationale for why we chose the models that we have is basically after what Dr. Reedy illustrated for you. Our community really wanted to keep the schools as efficient as possible, but small enough so that kids could participate. Our goal is for almost all of our kids. We'd like to get to 100%, but 85% like they have in Frisco is amazing. And so we want our kids to participate in everything. And so we felt like the sweet spot was 2250 to 2500. And so with the opening of our third high school in the next couple of years, we'll be at 2250 in each one of those schools. And it was also really important for our community to have true and pure feeder patterns. So just like everybody's a tiger here, we wanted everybody in the Hayes feeder pattern to be a rebel. We wanted everybody in the Lane feeder pattern to be a Lobo. And we wanted everybody in the Johnston feeder pattern to be a Jaguar. And so we have elementary schools that feed pure, middle schools that feed the high schools, and those patterns we hope to remain pure. And our goal in the future is just to add capacity to those middle schools so that we don't have to rezone those middle schools so that we can keep those patterns intact. And so the programming for each one of the high schools is going to be identical with the CTE offerings, the advanced academics, and all of the athletics, fine arts, etc. And so basically our model is pretty much the Frisco model. And so that's what we chose to do because we felt like that would give our kids the best opportunity, and financially it hits that sweet spot that Bruce illustrated on the educational research. And so that's another reason to line it up. Now I will tell you that when you have legacy schools, if you're going from one school like you have, and you start opening new ones, people have major feelings about that. You know, at the beginning, most people don't want to go to the new school until the new school opens, and then they love the new school. And so I know, you know, people always are fearful of that. My wife is currently working in Untitled Chapter, and they're experiencing the same thing that you guys are. And I know they are opening up a 9th grade center, and they're talking in the future of splitting theirs, but they want to keep the mascot, the hippo, for everybody, even if they open 2 schools. So I get what you're going through, and I appreciate the fact that y'all are taking the time to research all the different models, and as many of the other presenters have said, it's basically up to the community and what the community wants, because whatever you all can agree on, you can make it work, and you can make it an excellent atmosphere and environment for your kids. So thank you. Any questions?
What's the difference in socioeconomic between the high schools?
Okay, the question was, what's the difference in the socioeconomic status of our high schools? Lehman is going to be right around 60%, and then Johnston is going to be right around 38%, and Hayes will be about 40%. And so that was difficult because when the board set the parameters for what we were looking at as far as rezoning was concerned, socioeconomic status at that time was not considered. And so basically they wanted to keep the neighborhood schools concept so that we didn't have to bus kids for an hour and a half across the So our community chose to keep the neighborhood schools concept at the top of the list. Yes, sir.
I have a question. It's not exactly related to population, but I know you all had the citizens involved in some sort of bond oversight committee related to this growth and making sure that tax dollars are spent efficiently. Can you speak to that and how that works within your district and whether that's a positive or negative influence from your perspective as a superintendent?
Yes, we have a facilities and bond oversight committee that the school board members need to appoint for community constituents to that committee. And we meet regularly to discuss all aspects of the bond just for accountability. And I think it's a great idea because from the design phase to the completion of the project, you have input from those that are familiar with what we sold to the voters and what is supposed to be in place. And they're great ambassadors, but they also hold us accountable and keep us in line and check for what we promised the voters. All right, thank you very much, and good luck with your decision.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. We appreciate you coming out and being with us tonight. Our next guest is going to be here from Rockwall ISD, Dr. Tom Maglisceau, and I probably got that right, wrong. I'm sure he will help correct me. He's the Chief Student Services Officer in Rockwall ISD, and I have to say that Tom is the only one that I didn't get to visit ahead of time, so this is kind of like that potluck box where I don't know what we're going to get here, so welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. Don't worry about the last name. Tom works great with me. Everybody slaughtered my last name, so as long as I've been alive, I've had that. I'm pleased to speak about Rockwall. When I first came to Rockwall, I was the principal at an elementary school around the corner here, and I came here as much a personal decision to come here as it was professional, as I wanted to bring my family to Rockwall ISD as well too, and had a great joy of getting to have my children come through my schools as I got to serve as principal. I took over at Rockwall Heath High School. Notice it's Rockwall Heath High School. Our school was built as second high school, and no one wanted to have the name Heath High School. It had to have Rockwall-Heath High School. And at the very first graduation, we had our valedictorian who gave a great speech and mentioned that we would have 3 more high schools in our town. And since we served McLennan, Chisholm, Fate as well, he joked that soon to come will be Rockwall Fate High School and Rockwall McLennan Chisholm High School as well too. And so our town kind of has evolved around these schools. It's tough being, when I took over at Rockwall Heath High School, it was the second year of that school's existence. And I'd like to say that I'm proud that our school came into its own during that time, and it's because of great staff members. My good friend Jason Johnston spoke to you guys. He was first up, and I apologize if we're there on HDTV for Jason and I both. This is a lot of face, so I apologize for that. I did notice that Jason filled up the frame a lot more than I do. He does like his donuts a little more than I do. But when he first came along, and I do call it Heath High School, as a lot of us have through time started to call it Heath High School. We started having a lot of success again because of the great staff that we have. And like Jason talked about the culture at his school at Allen, I think Gripping Springs is a fantastic school district. And all the schools that you brought out here, heck, you even have a superintendent who has a school named after him who's speaking to you tonight. Just when you fill a school with fantastic staff and get strong leadership, I can't speak for the leadership at Heath High School, but when you have good educators who care about kids, you're going to be successful. When you have a town that's going to wrap itself its arms around the school, you're going to have fantastic things happen. Part of our success at Heath, in terms of kind of getting a name for ourselves, admittedly, did come from the fact that we started getting strong participation out of all of our kids. We have about in any given time, about 80% of our kids that participate in something at our school. We work very hard to get them connected. We were fortunate in my time, in my short time at EAT, that we had a state championship baseball team, a state championship wrestling team, both of which, by the way, beat Allen High School along the way. If Jason's still there, I hope he heard that and was reminded of that. We also had a state championship academic decathlon team, a state championship robotics team, and a state championship cheerleading team once that became a state competition. And so we were proud of the fact that we were getting success out of our kids. Again, a testament to our kids, a testament to our staff, but also a testament to our community as well, too. Right now, oh, and by the way, our football team beat Rockwall High School the first 2 years we played each other, and currently leads 6-4 in the series against the two high schools. Not that everything's about football, but I did see your research out of Allen, and well, there's a little bit that has something to do with football there. In Rockwall, he serves the south side of our community. Rockwall High School serves the north side, and it's nice that we do have that boundary of I-30 that drives right through our school district, and so that's how we divide things up. It was tough enough to become, to split Jacket Nation, Rockwall High School's Jacket Nation, because when you have an entire community who grew up and went to that high school and went to those games, and suddenly now comes along this second team, this second school. We do not get the attendance at our games that Rockwall High School gets at their games, and that's something that I think our fans note. It's something that we see. If you go to our beautiful stadium, I just was there today, the Rockwall Yellow Jackets, right outside of their locker room, it says home. And if you go to the Heat side, where our locker room is, it says visitor. I think there are times that our students do feel that. There are times that our families do feel that. But that also sort of became a source of pride for us as well, too. Currently, our school district is considering the exact same thing you're having to deal with. When I first came along, there was always a plan that we would have 4 high schools and 4 comprehensive high schools, and one alternative campus that would be a college career academy. We have just built a college career academy, which now holds 400 kids from each of our 2 high schools at any point in time of the day. It means kids are traveling back and forth, but it does alleviate some of the size at the school. You can see it. This is the first year that building's been open. You can see it in the halls, and you can see it in the cafeteria that it's not as full. But we will grow back into our schools as they are, because now the thought is that with that college and career academy pulling students from both high schools, our high schools can grow to 3,500 kids. And I will say, as a building principal, that does impact the climate. Not the culture of the school, but it impacts the climate. The culture is what those great people in the school will make it, what the community makes it. The climate can change on a whim, though, and when you have very full hallways, very full cafeterias, very full classes, and you have teachers that are needing to float all around the building from room to room and don't really have their own home room, it does impact the campus. The last thing that I think I'd probably say, as someone who grew into Heath High School, we actually doubled in size at the time that I served as the principal there, in both the student size and then also the physical plant, because our school is designed to be built in 2 phases, and we built the second phase while I was there, which included fine arts, growth, and all kinds of great things. But you turn a corner when the school gets bigger than 1,700 kids. I feel like as a building leader. I think you turn another corner when it gets bigger than 1,900. And I think you definitely turn a corner when you get above 2,000. And as you grow into the 2,500s, it gets a lot harder for kids to not feel like a number sometimes, and to not have as many people who know them. I love what Jason Johnston. Jason truly is a very good friend, and he is a quality man, a quality educator. I love to hear the things he's doing. It's worth a look to go look at Allen High School, I would say. I've been there a couple of times to see, and they do try to build a family feel and encourage kids to get to know one another. As a father, My kids have had great fortune, great experiences at Heath High School. Admittedly, I think there might have been more opportunity for one of my sons to, who maybe wasn't as strong an athlete as my younger son. He might have had a few other opportunities available to him, but he found his niche, and kids can always find their niche, especially when you have great people, great educators that are taking care of their kids.
Excellent. Thank you,
Tom, we're going to turn it over and see if anybody has questions for Tom. All right, I guess you get off easy. Thank you very much for joining us again. You're welcome to stay and listen to the rest. We have one more presentation.
I'll stick around.
Excellent. So our last guest tonight is Dr. Karen Engle, and Karen is currently Assistant Superintendent at Clear Creek ISD on the east side of Houston. The reason that Karen is with us tonight is she was the high school principal when Clear Creek ISD opened their educational village on 150 acres, and that consists of a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school all on the same site. And since we have this potential, as I pointed out earlier, for that perhaps happening in our district at some point in time, I wanted you to hear a little bit of perspective about what that might look like and feel like. So very proud to have with us Dr. Karen Engle. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Yes, we're in Clear Creek ISD. We have approximately a little over 42,000 students, 5,000 staff. We have 5 comprehensive high schools and then 2 alternative schools. And I did have the privilege of working at several of those as principal. But we've opened 2 high schools. Really in the past 12 years, we've opened 2 comprehensive high schools. Our goal is to maintain about a 2,500 student population in the high schools. That's fluctuated a little bit. As a matter of fact, on Monday, we are going to pass a board is looking to pass a new rezoning, and so we are going to make a little shuffle on some of our high schools as of next year. But we will be open. What we look at is 2,500 maximum, and so the last of those 5 comprehensive high schools was Clear Falls High School, which is a part of the Education Village. It is a complex that actually is connected by a commons area, and it's connected to an elementary and an intermediate and a high school all on one site. Close 5,000 if you have the high school, elementary, and intermediate plus the staff. It's kind of designed for that. So we were opening up the Clear Falls High School part of the elementary opened first, and then the high school and the intermediate opened right after that the following year. The high school was pulling from 2 other high schools in the district. One was the oldest, and the other was a prestigious Clear Lake High School that was at the time the largest exemplary high school in the state of Texas. And unfortunately, no one wanted to leave either one of those schools. So we were tasked with the charge of trying to pull kids from both of those schools and make a new high school at the time. What we did, we opened with freshmen and sophomores. We held very tight to those transfers. We did not allow students to transfer out of the new high school. It was tough. It was a little bit of a battle at the time, but it was absolutely worth the effort to keep those freshmen and sophomores together and not allow them to go back to those other campuses. And keep in mind, some of those students had siblings at the other campuses. The previous schools, it was a little bit difficult that first year. But what we did is we really encouraged students to think about the leadership opportunities that they would have at the new school. They voted on the mascot. They were able to put up cheers and chants, everything they could do. we pushed it. They were head of clubs, student council, a cheerleader, football, and all of the athletics, every organization. I think our biggest selling point was your leadership opportunity. That's going to be great on a resume, great going to college. And so we really pushed that, and we celebrated your leadership as they went through. We did, I would say one of the biggest challenges we had at first, and we just had to personalize it, was we had some students, some students are very advanced. So if we had a sophomore who was taking a senior level AP Physics or Spanish 5, we had to figure out, we did not have the staff, since we didn't have a junior senior class, to offer those courses. So we gave those students an opportunity to travel. We made it work with those individual students. That was a little bit of the issue, just a lot of communication. A lot of communication on Twitter, a lot of positive community building with the school, and I'd say by that second year, people were certainly owning that their new school, and they were becoming nice. And now, with the rezoning, no one wants to leave Clear Falls and to be rezoned to another school, so that's a great place to be. All we're doing right now is leveling back out. Clear Falls is in a growing community, and it is pushing 2,900. We have some other schools in areas that aren't growing so much, they're more like 22, but we've done a little rezoning, and that will be finalized like in the next week, even that out to about 2,600. I agree, as a high school principal, the larger the campus, the more difficult it is to connect. So that is for us in our school district. Really well, that's kind of our number, and it has been a nice time to keep to that. The board is really well designed about. I did want to mention feeder patterns. We have been, unfortunately, unable to really keep true feeder patterns. We have 4 magnet schools in the intermediate, a couple of wave schools, and then 2 science magnet schools, which take a large population of those schools are not zoned directly, so they're not in direct feeders. We have a little challenge with feeders. We don't have them feeders. But overall, I think that the growing pains that first year bring everybody in, the benefits far outweigh. It's difficult, but if you can fight through that and you just start building that community, being positive, looking at the opportunities instead of the challenges, and personalizing things to help students that are outliers, especially a higher academic achievers, will make that work for you, will make that happen. So overall, it was a great opportunity experience for us, and actually for me, once we got that set, they did a complete rebuild of Christmas, which was an older facility, $98 million rebuild. They're starting to worked on that rebuild for a while. So pretty familiar with the high schools, and I think we've done a nice job of keeping us equitable. We're all 6A, 5 6A schools, and we're all in the same 24 6A, so we compete a lot with everything, athletics, academics, fine arts, and it's a very healthy competition. So our experience went well, just a little growing pains right up front, and you just have to be willing to work through that. That's about our story, I guess. Any questions?
Yeah, Karen, I have a couple of questions. So could you speak to, obviously now you have pre-K 12 on one side. Do those students flow essentially, if you start in pre-K at the elementary, do you flow all the way through Clear Falls High School?
Yes, they do. Now, your elementary, yes, we go straight through to the intermediate and the high school. All 3 of the schools have the same mascot over all the nights. All 3. Now, because you're going to have like 2 or 3 intermediate elementaries that feed into an intermediate, you do pull in intermediate students. Pull in elementaries that are going to that into Mesa Intermediate that did not go to the elementary on that in the education village, And the same thing with the high school. Then you're going to start bringing in two different intermediate schools, one Bayside that's connected to the Education Village, and the other that is not. And you bring those together to the high school. We were very deliberate at reaching out to the school that wasn't connected to the Education Village and trying to definitely make them feel a part of that community. I have to say, the Education Village is if you could ever experience that opportunity, we had high school students going to the elementary, intermediate all the time. We have early childhood courses, career technology courses at the high school. Their classroom is at the elementary school, and they have what we call Camelot kids for the night, so we kind of keep the thing going. The Camelot kids at the elementary, that the high school students enter the elementary, and you can have a little preschool over there. We've done the opportunities for collaboration and mentoring K through 12 are endless. In a facility like that, we have the physical ability to move back and forth.
Excellent, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience for Karen?
I just wanted to ask what the impetus was behind the Education Village, why that particular decision was made. Was it just geography, or was there a particular philosophy that you were going for with that setup?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really a vision of Dr. Sandra Lawson, the superintendent at the time, to see what the possibilities were for instruction and building community K through 12. It was really a visionary experiment, I guess, to see what we could do with that, and what opportunities students could benefit from. I know KDISD, there are other schools. We had a lot of visitors that came out and looked, and I know that he became the architect that has built several education villages around the state. But I would say that just the vision of honestly, what are the possibilities? What could we do? How could we move forward in education if we had all these children together? And what could we learn? I think one of my favorite things the elementary kids would come into science classrooms and do little experiments, Halloween, they were pumpkins and all kinds of things in physics. So the physics students are understanding the physics that they're learning, and they're actually teaching it to younger students. So, when you teach it, you learn it. So just the learning and the interaction. We've also done a lot with the staff, K through 12. We used to do a K through 12 professional learning time together, where everyone comes and shares experiences. We can kind of have a band that is made up of some staff that they sing. You're always looking to build community and build positive experiences with the staff. So just building that sense of community and what could come out of that. So that, and I think we were really, really pleased.
Any other questions?
Hi, I just want to understand, what would you guys do differently if you could do it over again? How would you evolve or change in what you learned?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I could hear that question.
She asked, what would you do differently if you had to do it over?
To open the school differently? I would be prepared for some of the negative at first. I guess I'm by nature kind of an optimist, and so I thought, oh, this is great, and I wasn't quite prepared for some of the intense feelings of parents. It was more parents than students, not wanting their students to come. I found that students are incredibly resilient. And a lot of times it's more of the parents. They bought a home in a certain subdivision, and that's where they assume that they're going to go to high school, and that's where their older brothers and their older siblings went to school. But just being prepared and kind of getting out in front of it, a positive community building, I would have done a little bit more up front as far as bringing the students together, the parents together, some more opportunities to explain what we're doing to give them a little more say in maybe designing some things. We did go to the intermediate schools and let them vote on a mascot. So we tried to reach out, but I would probably do more of that, just to, by the time they got to the school, they felt a part of it. I did have a year to get ready, if you will, to open the school, so I think that was valuable time to think and process. We visited a lot of campuses and looked at furniture and those type of things, so I think the time that we were allowed to, were given to prepare was a huge advantage for us.
Anybody else? Well, I don't know how many of them are still back behind that screen, but can we please give them a very big thank you for that? All right, we are going to switch back to the agenda. I want to point out a couple of things on it, Dr. Misco.
Yeah, I actually had a question for Dr. Reedy. So you've got, quite a few moderately sized high schools, and but a district that's, got tremendous economic power, and you're near high schools that are very large. And I'm just curious, do you have any observations about resources that you wish that were available in high schools that were larger, specialized technical equipment, teachers with specialized training? Do you get any of that, parents?
Didn't get it from parents, but I know what you're talking about, and we had that fear. I think we have alleviated some of that fear with the CTE program we have, because it has that equipment, that technology and that programming, and it is available to the students. And we have been able to, we've been blessed there. I would say that one of the things that we had was a city manager who understood 70% of Frisco ISD is in the city of Frisco, and the city manager understood that anything that was good for the school district was good for the city. And he brought us into economic development activities that allowed us. I said earlier, we weren't smart enough to know that we couldn't afford high schools that size. Well, with this city manager, it turned out that we could. He has been the unsung hero of Frisco ISD, and I give him credit all the time. He had dragged me kicking and screaming into a lot of deals that I thought would be the end of my career that turned out to be good for the kids in Frisco ISD. So, yes, I have thought that maybe with high schools a little larger, there might be a little more opportunity, but it's a trade-off. And I think once it was set, once the decision was made, there wasn't anything I could do about it. That's what the community wanted, just like every community has to decide. And my job was just to try to carry on the vision, and that's what I tried to do. And I think that's what the superintendents that have followed me have tried to do also. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but I wonder, could you name any of those resources that you wish that if you were larger?
Well, some of the programs that we have at the CTE Center would be nice to have locally. For instance, graphic design, the high-tech equipment that goes with that, it would be nice to have that on every campus. Frankly, we don't have the space nor the resources to replicate that on 12 campuses. So there may be some students who are not willing, who are so invested in their comprehensive high school program that they don't take advantage of that programming, and therefore, when they would have if it were on campus. So those thoughts have come to me. And I think that's a valid concern as you look at high school size.
Thank you. I planned this meeting perfectly, except I forgot sign-in sheets. So that is going to send some of those around. If you wouldn't mind, please sign in. That is very valuable information to us. I also want to acknowledge Steve Snell. Steve is the current superintendent for Liberty Hill ISD, and I'm going to give you the microphone if you wish.
Well, first of all, thanks to Bruce for having me. Liberty Hill is just a few years behind y'all. So I wanted to come over and learn and hear these things. I was actually in the Houston area when Clear Creek started designing and talking about that education building. So that's innovation on a whole nother level. But I just applaud y'all for being here today. I know it's tough to take a Thursday night and your time. But your input for public schools in this district is so valuable. I know there's a lot of staff members here too, but again, Bruce, I just thank you so much for the opportunity and learning from y'all's trials and successes, and hopefully we can follow the Dripping Springs model here in a couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Right, I want to just run back up the agenda a little bit because I want to take you into this research article and video links page and just make sure that I point out a couple of things on there. These are just those school research articles. He's going to scroll down. There's a couple of articles on Adam High School which are worth looking at. That 3-part article I think that Dr. Reedy referenced, I believe, is linked in there. That's the rank order URL. And these video perspectives are of students from Frisco ISD as they made the transition to multiple high schools, and the pain of that is expressed quite well in the videos. You hear the voice of the students and also of the parents. One of those videos is very telling. By the end, the parent is acknowledging, I should have just really listened to my kid a little more and left them alone a little more. The issue was really mine and not so much my kids. Site there, that's interesting just because they also have an educational village, and so that shows up in that video. And then the very last one is the passive build-out memo from population and survey analysts that addresses what we potentially might look like a build-out. We have asked them to update that, so they did that in March of 2018. They are currently updating that, so when they present the final demographic report, they'll have a new build-out number for us. So they'll have a better idea of what that looks like. But I just wanted to make sure I referenced that very quickly. So, we are almost on time. Will you go back to the agenda, please? The last couple of things on our agenda tonight are simply to discuss our strategy for in-between meetings, and again, this is the same as what we presented at the first meeting. So on that long-range facility planning committee webpage, you will find all of the information and data from the first meeting in November. The demographic study is up there. There's also everything that was presented tonight, the agenda with all the links and all the data, and everything will go up on the webpage so that you have easy access to that at any time you need to go and look something up. We do have the Google form that's linked here in the agenda so that you can submit ideas, thoughts, questions, concerns, anything that you want to know extra. If you'll just drop it in this Google form, that gives us a good way of tracking all of that data over time, which we really want to be conscious of and careful of to make sure that we acknowledge the input of the committee and of the community at large. At this time, are there any other comments, questions, concerns? We'd be happy to have a brief discussion, and I want to try to get us out of here a little earlier on time.
So my question is, with schools like Lake Travis and Westlake, who I don't think anyone would argue are pretty successful with single high school model, are you engaging them, considering the proximity to us? Were they invited here? And then finally, what do you want to see happen? Like, what is your personal goal in this, or is the long-term plan?
So I thought I might get away without a lot of questions. Yes, Lake Travis and Westlake High School, Eads ISD, we have engaged both of those in conversation. I've talked directly with Brad Lancaster at Lake Travis and with Tom Leonard at Eads ISD. Both were invited to be part of this conversation and elected not to be for various different reasons. And so I'll leave it to them to explain to you why they're not here tonight. I'm not going to speak for them. I did attend the Lake Travis board meeting last month in January because Population and Survey Analysts who's doing our demographic study just completed their demographic study and presented their final report. So I went and listened to Dr. Pat Guzman and Dr. Stacy Tempera make that presentation because we now have a much bigger regional picture, having PASA doing the demographic study north of us and then in our district as well. So that gives us some idea. Their demographic study gave them a little surprise this year. They've been growing like us, about 6 to 7% a year for the last several years. This year they grew half of that, about 2.5%. The issue in Lake Travis this year is not that they're not selling houses. The houses are selling at the same rate they were. The problem is that they're being bought up by baby boomers who have no children. And so their student ratio per house fell drastically this year. The big question is that a long-term trend now, or is that just a one-year blip and then they pick up with their growth again next time? They have some of the similar challenges to us in terms of geography. So with the lake and with the topography, they have similar kinds of building challenges that we have with utilities and things like that. Currently, they have about 3,500 student capacity at the high school, but that's because they took an existing middle school that was right next door to the high school and turned it into essentially a 9th grade center. And so they have that capacity now at Lake Travis High School. Their demographic study indicates that at some point in time they will outgrow that facility, and so their choice is, in some senses, similar to ours about how they would manage that. Westlake Eads ISD is a little different. They're landlocked, they're pretty much built out. They have some very slow growth as some of their neighborhoods change in nature, but for the most part I don't think Westlake will ever be anything other than a one high school town. But it also won't be an Allen high school, just because of their landlocked nature. That's one. 2 questions, and then I was going to try to skip the third one, but since you pressed me on it. When we did the 2018 bond planning, we laid out, and this actually addresses some of the feeder patterns, we laid out a plan, a potential plan that included building a second high school in Dripping Springs. Educationally, I am of the opinion that smaller high schools are better educationally for students, academically, socially, emotionally, and I think eventually, if it were my choice only, I would build a second high school in Dripping Springs on the site that we have and try to plan for an educational village very similar to what Clear Creek and Scyther have put together. We have that potential. If you go back and look at the materials from the 2018 bond, you'll see that we really essentially laid out a plan that looks exactly like that. The feeder patterns for that plan are very clean and very clear. We end up having 4 elementary middle school pairs in the district, eventually by about 2028, similar to the Sycamore model, and 1 standalone elementary that feeds into each of those pairs, so that you have 2 elementaries and a middle school paired together at every time, and then 2 of those pairs feed into each of the 2 high schools. So the feeder pattern there is very clear. If you do it differently, and we did model this in the 2018 bond preparation, and you go to building standalone elementary schools and standalone middle schools, then you do end up with a situation where you have 3 1,200 student middle schools in the district, and those feed then into 2 high schools. You have to split one of those middle schools. So half of the middle school goes one way, half the middle school goes the other way. That still looks at 2 high schools model. But I will tell you that I will never make this decision for this district, because this is not not a superintendent decision to make, this is a community decision to make. And that's why we're in this process, because the community has to decide, what do we want for the future of our children in this community? What do we want learning to look like? What do we want the facilities to look like? And how do we want to educate our children? Part of that is we have to look at the cost of that over time. But understand that we have to serve 3,200 odd students at the high school level in 2025. That is not going to happen in this facility. It's impossible for that to happen in this facility. So something else has to happen. Something else has to be ready to serve that number of students at that time. Whatever that is going to cost the district money to construct. It's going to cost money to acquire land. It's going to take a lot of planning and decision making on how that looks and how it goes together. So we have to look at our physical reality. We have to look at where the concentration of students are across the district. That's why we do the demographic studies. We have to look at what land we have available close to this site if we're going to be a one high school town, so that we can create opportunities for students. You heard all of these high school principals and school administrators talk about the fact that kids are going to be shuttled across the district. That is happening already in our district. As we blur grade levels, lines, and we start to have students accelerating through the district, we're already moving students from middle schools to the high school during the day. And we have opportunities at Sycamore Springs to move middle school students down into the elementary level, to mentor kids and to work with younger kids as well. And that is going to become an opportunity at Walnut Springs Elementary and Dripping Springs Middle School once the new Walnut Springs Elementary School is constructed. And that will, of course, be the second of our elementary middle school pairs. Elementary number 5 is being constructed right now and being master planned to accommodate middle school number 3, and then elementary number 6 will be master planned to accommodate middle school number 4. That is essentially what the community agreed to do in the 2018 bond. And so that's the way that we're planning as we go forward. So we do have time on our side. That's the good thing. We don't have forever because we are growing and the students are coming. And as a public school, we accept whatever students walk in our doors and we educate them, whoever they are. And we want to do that in a very purposeful and well thought out way. And we want to have lots of community conversation and as much agreement as possible on how eventually we educate the students of our community. I, for one, moved to this community because I wanted a community like this to raise my own children. And so I chose Dripping Springs, just got lucky enough to get a job here. And so that is true of a lot of people that I talk to. And we want to make sure that we maintain that level of excellence for all of our students, for sure, but for our community as a whole. Mike.
I have a question. Specifically, you're talking about proximity to the current high school campus. We have the admin building that the district is planning to be a town center, a bunch of government offices that's right here. We have Walnut Springs Elementary that y'all are turning into an admin building that's right here. There's 200 acres of vacant land immediately adjacent to the east of this campus. Why hasn't the district considered for one high school campus to incorporate some of those land, or at least keep it available for the possibility that we're going to be a one high school campus?
Well, that's precisely why we're in this room tonight, to have the conversation about these are the opportunities, and as we start to move down the road and the community starts to have those conversations and make those decisions, those are exactly the things that we need to consider and plan for as we go forward in the future.
But are contracts and plans already in place to for instance, renovate Walnut Springs into the admin building, and are contracts already in place to turn that current administrative building into a town center? I mean, is that stuff that can be rolled back, or is that already set in stone? So
this community did make a decision in May of 2018, however small the margin was, the community did make a decision to move forward in the path that we have laid out for the district right now, as it pertains to the $132 million worth of bonding capacity in the 2018 bond. And those projects we laid out for you very carefully tonight. So we know how we're going forward with those projects. What we're talking about now is how do we go forward in the future, and how do we address the high school population in August of 2025 when we get there. And so that is absolutely the conversation that we have to have. We cannot change what's happened up until this moment in time. We only have control over what happens from here forward. And so that's what we're going to do, and we're going to have as much conversation about that as possible. We're going to come to as high level of agreement as possible, but in the end, the community has to speak. That's why the system is designed the way it is, and we have mechanisms in place to make sure that those decisions are made fair. Yes.
Okay. My question isn't necessarily a question that I would ask that you answer today, just like as we move forward, because I think in kind of assessing the room, probably none of us were educated in an educational village type of model, or have had a kid go through that. And I think that what we don't know is what always prompts our questions, because it's unfamiliar. And I would be interested to know in that type of setup, what is a measured success? What is something that they can point to, because it's so new, because it's something that's really kind of, in an educational world, experimental per se. What's something we can look at from that model and say, this has been a paramount success when we've implemented it in this scenario versus a typical K through 12 model that we're all familiar with? Because I think the questions sometimes just come from, nobody really knows, none of us did it. And all of us reflect back on what our experience was. Well, I went to a mega school, my experience is different than your experience. So just maybe moving forward, if we can see something like that.
Absolutely. We will certainly do that. I think we have Sycamore Springs Elementary School and Middle School as a starting point for that conversation. And I think you have to visit, and you have to talk to the principals, and you have to talk to the teachers, and you have to talk to the kids, because when you experience what's happening there, and the fact that on a daily basis, not only do we have elementary kids moving up to the middle school to take classes, but we have between 300 and 400 middle school kids a day moving down into the elementary school to work with younger kids. And the impact that those middle school kids have on the younger kids is profound. When an elementary classroom full of kids has kids crying in it because their middle school student didn't show up because they had another commitment, that speaks to the impact that those students have. And then when you're able to speak to the middle school kids and understand the impact that going down there and working with those kids has on them as people, those are the kinds of measures of success that I think people have to experience firsthand. So I can tell you about what I see as I move around the district and walk in and out of these buildings, but I think you really have to talk to the people who are on the ground in those situations and working.
Ask you another question.
Yes.
What are the realistic options that we have right now? The village and the west. Because if we already have the property, Walnut Springs already spoken to, we really can't expand out, right? Can't really do anything with the high school as it is now, even with the extension that you can put on it. There's no really other option, is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
So there's always another option. It's just that those options may be more or less difficult to accomplish, or they may be more or less expensive to accomplish. And so I think that's what I'm saying is, I have thought through this a lot, and so I kind of know what I think about it, but that doesn't mean that that's all that's out there. And I think that's what my charge to everybody in this room is you have to get out there and start thinking about these things very seriously. You have to talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and I wish somebody would come to me and say, here's what you really need to do because this is the best idea.
Just gotta go to Facebook for that.
Right. So that would make my life a whole lot easier, I promise, today.
I wanted to echo kind of the sentiment that I'm not getting a clear understanding of how one high school community would move forward given the footprint. So that's why I asked about how large is that land, and it's 17 acres. And in my mind, I'm thinking that's not big enough. And so then we would need to buy up other parcels of land around here. And is there other land available? And where would that be? So it's like you can kind of clearly see the other path,
because you know it's on this piece of land, and it would be these schools, but it's not as clear to see what the path would be for the one high school concept, so it's hard to kind of think about how to compare them. So maybe going forward, if we could have more information about what really is possible with the one high school plan, and then we could weigh them a little bit better, that would be helpful for me.
You're absolutely right, and I can tell you what I think, but it doesn't really matter because there's always another way. So just now while you're speaking, I mean, if you think about what Alan did, and that's why I want to engage as many other people around the state as possible and look at as many other models as possible, because sometimes you get a new idea that you just hadn't thought about. What they did in 1995 was they said, here's our current high school. We want to be a one high school town. That's the first decision. If we're going to do that, what do we have to accomplish? Well, we have to build a mega high school then, because we know at some point in time we're going to have 65 or 7,000 students in that high school. So they managed to acquire 177 acres next to where they were, and they built a new high school that they knew could accommodate that many students on it. So that's what we have to think about. So if we're going to be a one high school town, then we have to figure out how are we going to do that. Are we going to keep this as the one high school? And are we going to expand it? If so, what do we need to do? Do we need to acquire land around here? Well, land is always for sale. It's just you have to pay enough money for it. But I mean, there's ways to do that, I think, if we're creative and if we think through it carefully. It's not easy, I don't think. And land is not cheap in Dripping Springs, if anybody's tried to buy land. But that's true, you know, across our district. But that doesn't mean we couldn't say, okay, we have 150 acres on Garden Hill. We can build a brand new high school on Garden Hill and make that the one high school and accommodate 6,500 kids out there. And we can turn this current facility into a middle school, into an elementary middle school. We could do something with it. I'm not limiting how we're thinking right now. And I think that's what we have to be very careful of. We can't say, this is how we want to do it, or this is the only way, or there's no. We have to stop and say, what do we want to do? What do we want education to look like for our kids? What do we want our community to be like? What's going to be the best thing for our community over the long term? And when I say this is a 100-year decision, it really is, because the decision that gets made now is going to impact this community for a very long time. When Alan made that decision in 1995, they impacted their community all the way through now, and really for a very long time going on. I understand that what didn't get mentioned about Alan was at that time there was a movement of folks who didn't want to be part of that mega high school, and they actually splintered off. And there is a new district called Lovejoy ISD right next to Allen that has those folks in it, and they have a small 4A high school. And that's what they wanted. And so they managed to make that arrangement when they did that. So there is no restriction on what we can do. There's enough brilliant minds in this town to figure this out. But what we have to figure out is what do we want as a community? That's the most important question. And we have about a year to figure that out. But it can't just be the people in this room either, by the way. We have to be sure that we know what this whole community wants and that we understand what they're going to do when it comes to crunch point, which is going to be, in reality, a bond election which has a package on it that decides how are we going to go forward as a community. And so that's why we're here and having this conversation. All right, I'm tired, so we're going to go home. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you for your time. Let us know if you have questions. Yes, it is important to us to know that you were here, so please sign a sheet if you haven't signed a sign sheet. Thank you.